3 days after burying Margaret, my wife of 42 years, I sat at the mahogany conference table in my company's boardroom, watching my daughter-in-law Sarah's manicured fingers drum against the wood. Her smile was razor-sharp as she leaned forward. "Now that the old woman is gone, you'll put the company in my son's name and fend for yourself." The words hung in the air like poison. I smiled back, my hand steady on the folder beneath the table. She had no idea what was coming. The morning we laid Margaret to rest started with an October chill that cut through my black wool coat. St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church stood against the gray sky, its bell tower reaching toward clouds that threatened rain. I sat in the front pew, my hands folded over the funeral program that featured Margaret's radiant smile from our 40th anniversary cruise. Thomas, my eldest son, stood at the podium, delivering his eulogy. His voice cracked as he spoke about his mother's banana bread and how she never missed one of his baseball games. I watched him grip the edges of the podium, his knuckles white with emotion. Yet, something felt off. Throughout his speech, he kept glancing toward the side door, not meeting my eyes once. Sarah sat beside me, her black designer dress, impeccable, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Every few minutes, her phone would buzz, and she'd check it with barely concealed impatience. During Thomas's most emotional moment, when he described Margaret reading bedtime stories, Sarah leaned over to whisper something to Marcus, her brother, who'd driven up from Atlanta. Marcus nodded, his expression calculating as he surveyed the church. He was a real estate developer, or so he claimed, always talking about his next big project. Today, though, his focus seemed entirely on the gathering of our family and friends. When we moved to the cemetery, the October wind picked up scattering leaves across the manicured lawn. As they lowered Margaret's casket, I noticed Sarah and Marcus step away from the group, their heads bent together in intense conversation. Sarah gestured toward me several times, and Marcus kept checking his watch. Daniel. My younger son moved closer to me. His wife, Grace, held their daughter Emma's hand, the 5-year-old clutching a drawing she'd made for Grandma. "Dad, are you doing okay?" Daniel asked, his concern genuine. Unlike Thomas, Daniel looked me directly in the eye. "I'm managing," I replied, though my attention was divided between the service and Sarah's suspicious behavior. After the burial, as people began dispersing, Sarah approached with determined steps. "Bruno, we need to have that family meeting. Tomorrow would be perfect. There's so much to sort out with Margaret's estate and the company." "Tomorrow," I repeated, stunned by her eagerness. "Sarah, we just buried her." "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice syrupy, with false sympathy. "But Thomas and I have obligations. We need to ensure everything is properly handled. You understand, don't you? Margaret would want us to be practical." Before I could respond, Helen Chen, Margaret's best friend since college, caught my elbow. "Bruno, could I speak with you privately?" Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she stepped back. "Tomorrow at 2, then, at your office?" I nodded absently, more interested in what Helen had to say. We walked toward my car, Helen glancing back to ensure we weren't followed. "Bruno, I need to tell you something." Helen began, her voice low. "Last week I saw Sarah at First National Bank. She had a folder of documents, estate papers, from what I could see. This was while Margaret was still in hospice." My stomach tightened. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely. She was with a man in a suit, not Marcus. They were discussing asset transfers. I heard Margaret's name several times." That evening, back at the house that felt too empty without Margaret's presence, I found myself in her study. Her scent still lingered, lavender and vanilla. On her desk sat a photo from our wedding day, both of us young, and convinced we could conquer the world together. Janet, my assistant of 20 years, had left several messages. When I called her back, her usually calm voice carried an edge of worry. "Bruno, I'm so sorry to bother you today of all days," she began, "but I need to inform you about something urgent. Someone has been accessing the company's financial records using Thomas's credentials. The activity started 3 weeks ago, always after hours." "What kind of records?" "Everything. Profit statements, asset valuations, subsidiary holdings, even the offshore accounts. Bruno, whoever this is, has been systematically cataloging every aspect of the company's worth. I sank into Margaret's chair, the leather creaking under my weight. Janet, I need you to quietly secure all sensitive documents. Change the access codes, but don't alert Thomas. Not yet. After ending the call, I noticed something peculiar. Margaret's private filing cabinet, which she always kept locked, showed tiny scratches around the keyhole. Fresh scratches. Opening my laptop, I pulled up our home security system. I rewound through the previous day's footage and found what I dreaded. 3 days before Margaret's death, while I was at the hospital with her, Sarah and Thomas had entered the house. The camera showed them going directly to Margaret's study. They were inside for over an hour. My phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Dad, I didn't want to worry you earlier, but something happened at the funeral reception that bothered me, he said. I overheard Sarah telling someone on the phone that everything was going according to plan and that you'd be handled by the end of the week. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. My eldest son's wife was orchestrating something, and Thomas appeared to be complicit. But how deep did this betrayal go? I walked to the window, gazing out at the garden Margaret had lovingly tended for decades. Her roses were still blooming defiant against the approaching winter. She'd always been the one to see through people's facades to protect our family from those who would harm us. Now that responsibility fell to me. As I prepared for bed in our too-quiet bedroom, I made a decision. Tomorrow's meeting would proceed as Sarah planned. I would play the part of the grieving widower, too shattered to think clearly. Let them believe they held all the cards. Because I'd learned long ago in business, the most dangerous opponent is the one who appears weakest. And if Sarah thought Margaret's death had broken me, she was about to discover just how wrong she was. The last thing I did before turning off the lights was send a text to an old friend. Rick, I need your help. Can you meet me early tomorrow? Rick Harrison had served with me in Vietnam and later became one of the best private investigators in Georgia. If Sarah wanted to play games with my family's legacy, she'd learned that some old soldiers never forget their training. Sleep eluded me that night, but I forced myself to stay in bed planning my next moves. At 6 a.m, I drove to Rick's office in downtown Atlanta. The building was nondescript, exactly how Rick preferred it. His investigations had exposed everyone from cheating spouses to corporate embezzlers, and discretion was his trademark. Bruno. Rick greeted me, his weathered face creased with concern. I'm sorry about Margaret. She was a wonderful woman. Thank you, I said, settling into the worn leather chair across from his desk. Rick, I need your skills. Something's not right with my daughter-in-law. I laid out everything Helen's citing at the bank, the accessed computer files, the scratched lock, Sarah's eagerness for an immediate estate meeting. Rick took notes in his small notebook, his expression growing darker with each detail. You suspect she's after the inheritance? He asked. I suspect more than that, I admitted. Margaret's death was supposedly natural heart failure. But the timing, Sarah's behavior? I need you to investigate everything about her. Background finances associates, everything. Rick nodded. I'll start immediately. Give me 48 hours for preliminary findings. Returning home, I found Thomas's car in the driveway. My chest tightened. It was only 8 a.m. What were they doing here? I entered through the garage, moving quietly. Voices drifted from Margaret's study. Through the partially open door, I saw Sarah and Thomas photographing documents from Margaret's desk. Sarah held up papers, while Thomas captured them with his phone. Make sure you get the property deeds clearly, Sarah instructed. Marcus needs to assess their value. I still don't feel right about this, Thomas said, but his protest was weak. Your mother is gone, Sarah snapped. Your father is old and clearly not thinking straight. Someone needs to protect the family assets. Do you want Daniel to swoop in and take everything? I backed away silently, my heart breaking. Thomas, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd worked summers at the company warehouse, To learn the business from the ground up was betraying me. Or was he being manipulated? I made noise coming through the front door, calling out, "Thomas, is that you?" They emerged from the study, Sarah's smile bright and false. "Bruno, we came by to help organize things for this afternoon's meeting. Thomas was worried you might be overwhelmed." Thomas couldn't meet my gaze. "Hi, Dad. We just wanted to help." I let my shoulders droop, added a tremor to my voice. "That's kind of you. This house feels so empty. I keep expecting to hear Margaret calling from the kitchen." Sarah's eyes gleamed with satisfaction at my apparent weakness. "Why don't you rest? We'll handle the preparations." "Maybe you're right." I agreed, shuffling toward the stairs. I didn't sleep well. Everything feels like a bad dream. In my bedroom, I locked the door and opened Margaret's jewelry box. Beneath the compartment holding her pearl necklace, I found what I was looking for: a small key. Margaret had shown it to me years ago. "Just in case," she'd said with that mysterious smile of hers. The key opened a hidden safe behind a painting in her walk-in closet. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, including a thick journal bound in burgundy leather. Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, dated entries going back 2 years. I flipped to recent entries, my hands beginning to shake as I read, October 2nd, Sarah's becoming bolder. She asked about Bruno's will today, pretending it was casual conversation. I didn't tell her about the trust structure. She has no idea the company isn't held in Bruno's personal name. October 5th. I'm feeling worse. The new heart medication doesn't seem to be helping. Sarah insists on picking it up for me. Says she's happy to help. Something feels wrong. October 10th. Bruno, if you're reading this, check the security footage from my birthday party last month. Focus on the kitchen around 9:30 in the evening. Trust your instincts, my love. Protect our boys. My hands trembled as I set down the journal. Margaret's 70th birthday party had been 6 weeks ago. We'd invited only family and close friends. I remembered Sarah volunteering to help with refreshments, insisting Margaret should just enjoy her special day. Back at my computer, I accessed our security system's cloud storage. The house had cameras in all common areas, a precaution I'd installed years ago. I found the date, September 15th, and scrolled to 9:30 in the evening. The kitchen camera showed Sarah alone removing something from her purse. She glanced around, checking she was unobserved, then opened the cabinet where Margaret kept her medications. The image was clear. Sarah switching prescription bottles, putting Margaret's heart medication in her purse, and replacing it with something else. I had to pause the video, my vision blurring with rage and grief. Margaret hadn't died naturally. She'd been murdered slowly, deliberately by someone we'd welcomed into our family. But I needed more than this. I needed to understand the full scope of Sarah's plan. I called Janet at the office. "Can you pull Thomas's phone records from the company account?" I asked. "Specifically, any calls to unknown numbers in the past 3 months." While waiting for Janet's information, I continued through the security footage. September 20th showed Sarah in Margaret's study photographing documents. September 25th, she was back, this time with someone I didn't recognize. A man in an expensive suit who examined our family photos with disturbing interest. My phone buzzed. Janet had sent the records. One number appeared repeatedly, calls to and from Thomas's phone, sometimes lasting over an hour. The number wasn't in his contacts. I did a reverse lookup and found it registered to a Marcus Conway in Miami. But wait. Sarah's brother was Marcus Richardson from Atlanta. Who was Marcus Conway? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Marcus Conway, Marcus Richardson, variations of both names. Finally, I found what I was looking for in a Miami newspaper archive from 8 years ago. Local businessman dies in suspicious circumstances. Wife inherits fortune. The accompanying photo showed a younger Sarah with dark hair, instead of blonde, standing beside a man identified as Robert Conway. The article mentioned that Robert's adult children contested the will, claiming their stepmother had manipulated their father. The case was settled out of court. Another search revealed more. Sarah Conway had remarried 2 years after Robert's death. to a David Mills in Jacksonville. David died of a heart attack 14 months later, leaving everything to his wife of just over a year. Again, family members raised suspicions, but couldn't prove anything. The phone on the nightstand rang, startling me. It was the house line, and the caller ID showed the incoming call was from within the house. From Margaret's study. "Bruno." Sarah's voice was honey-sweet. "Thomas found some papers that need your signature for this afternoon. Could you come down?" "I'll be right there," I replied, my voice deliberately shaky. I closed the laptop, locked the journal back in the safe, and prepared to face my son and his murderous wife. As I walked downstairs, I thought of Margaret's final message. She'd known. Somehow she'd known what Sarah was capable of, and had left me the evidence I needed. But evidence was only part of what I required. I needed to understand the full conspiracy needed to know if my son was a victim or a willing participant. And I needed to protect not just the company, but my entire family from whatever Sarah and her partner had planned. Entering the study, I found them waiting with documents spread across the desk. Sarah's smile was predatory, but she had no idea she was no longer the hunter. The real game was just beginning. The next morning, I maintained my facade of the broken widower. I arrived at the office later than usual, my shirt deliberately wrinkled, my hair uncombed. Janet gasped when she saw me. "Bruno, are you all right?" "Just tired," I mumbled, shuffling past her. "Couldn't find my good tie. Margaret always picked them out for me." Word of my apparent deterioration spread quickly through the company. By lunch, I'd overheard 2 department heads whispering about whether I was fit to continue as CEO. Exactly what I wanted them to think. Rick called my private cell at noon. "Can you get away for a meeting? I've found some interesting information." We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to 2 old men drinking coffee. Rick slid a folder across the table. "Your daughter-in-law has quite a history," he began. "Sarah Mills, formerly Sarah Conway, born Sarah Peterson. She's been married 3 times. Each husband was wealthy older and died within 2 years of marriage." "I found 2 of them," I said. "Robert Conway and David Mills." "There was a first one you missed," Rick continued. "William Harrison in Tampa 12 years ago. Died in a boating accident. Sarah was the only witness. I studied the photos Rick had compiled. The same woman, different hair colors and styles, standing beside 3 different men at their weddings. All the men looked happy, unaware of what awaited them." "There's more," Rick said, lowering his voice. "Marcus Richardson doesn't exist. At least, not as her brother. His real name is Marcus Conway. He's Robert Conway's nephew, not Sarah's brother. They've been running this con together for over a decade. They're partners." I said, the pieces clicking together. "More than that," Rick revealed. "I found hotel registrations, credit card records. They're lovers. Have been for years. The brother act is just cover." My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Don't forget meeting at 2. Thomas and I have wonderful news." Rick noticed my expression. "What are they planning?" "The estate meeting is this afternoon. Sarah's already shown her hand demanding I sign over the company. But there's something else." I showed him the photos I'd taken of Margaret's journal. My wife suspected Sarah was poisoning her. Rick's face darkened as he read. "Bruno, we need to involve the police." "Not yet," I said. "I need to know how deep Thomas is in this, and I need to protect the rest of my family. If we move too soon, Sarah might have contingencies." That afternoon, I arrived at the office conference room to find it already occupied. Sarah sat at the head of the table, my place with Thomas to her right. Marcus lounged in a chair, trying to appear casual, but watching me like a predator. Daniel and Grace were there too, looking uncomfortable. What surprised me was the presence of a man I didn't recognize, thin and nervous-looking with wire-rimmed glasses. "Bruno." Sarah stood mock concern on her face. "This is Dr. Gerald Stevenson. He's a psychiatric specialist." "What's a psychiatrist doing at an estate meeting?" Daniel demanded before I could respond. It's just a precaution, Sarah said smoothly. We've all noticed Bruno hasn't been himself since Margaret's passing. Dr. Stevenson is here to evaluate whether Bruno is capable of making important financial decisions. The audacity took my breath away. Grace stood up, her face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. Bruno just lost his wife. Of course he's grieving. Please, everyone calm down, Dr. Stevenson interjected. I'm simply here to observe and ensure Mr. Morrison's best interests are protected. I sank into a chair, letting my hands shake slightly. I don't understand what's happening. Sarah's smile widened. You see, Bruno, sweetheart, we're worried about you. You've been forgetting things, acting confused. Thomas found you in the garden at 3 a.m. last night, talking to Margaret as if she were still alive. That's a lie, Daniel exploded. Dad wasn't even home last night. He was with Grace and me. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, but backed his wife. Daniel, you don't know everything. Dad's been struggling more than you realize. The betrayal in Thomas's voice cut deep, but I had to stay in character. Maybe you're right. Everything's been so hard without her. Which is why Sarah produced a folder. We've prepared some documents to help ease your burden. Thomas can take over the company operations while you rest. Dr. Stevenson has already prepared a preliminary assessment supporting this transition. Based on what examination? Grace demanded. He hasn't even spoken to Bruno. Dr. Stevenson adjusted his glasses nervously. Mrs. Morrison provided extensive documentation of concerning behaviors. You mean Sarah? Daniel interrupted. She's not Mrs. Morrison. That was my mother. The room erupted in arguments. Through it all, I sat quietly, studying each face. Thomas wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus watched with barely concealed greed. Sarah orchestrated it all like a conductor. Finally, I stood. The room fell silent. I need time, I said weakly. This is all too much. Can we postpone until tomorrow? I'm afraid that's not possible, Sarah said. Dr. Stevenson has already filed his report with the court. There's a competency hearing scheduled for next week. But if you sign these papers now, we can avoid all that unpleasantness. She pushed documents toward me. I pretended to read them, though I already knew what they contained. Complete transfer of company ownership to Thomas with Sarah as co-signatory on all accounts. I need my reading glasses, I mumbled. Left them in my office. I'll get them, Thomas offered quickly. No, I said. I need a moment alone, please. I shuffled out, hearing Sarah whisper to someone as I left. In my office, I quickly called Charles Worthington, my real lawyer, not the corporate attorney Sarah assumed I used. Charles, it's time. Bring everything to tomorrow's meeting. Are you certain, Bruno? Once we do this, there's no going back. They're trying to have me declared incompetent. They've brought in a corrupt psychiatrist. We move tomorrow. I also sent a text to Rick. Need surveillance on Dr. Gerald Stevenson. Something's not right. Returning to the conference room, I found them in heated discussion. Daniel was standing now facing off against Thomas. You're really going along with this? Daniel shouted. Dad built this company from nothing, and you're letting your wife steal it. I'm not stealing anything, Sarah interjected coldly. I'm protecting family assets from an old man who's clearly lost his faculties. How dare you? Grace stepped forward. You're nothing but a gold-digging... Enough, I interrupted, my voice deliberately weak. Please, no fighting. Margaret wouldn't want this. I sank back into my chair, the picture of defeat. I'll think about your papers, Sarah. Can we meet again tomorrow? Same time. Sarah's eyes glittered with triumph. Of course, Bruno. Take all the time you need. Well, not all the time. The hearing is in 6 days. As they filed out, Daniel lingered. Dad, what's really going on? I patted his shoulder. Trust me, son. Just be here tomorrow. Both you and Grace. That evening, I sat in Margaret's garden, her roses perfuming the air. I wasn't alone. Janet had come by with boxes of files, and Rick was setting up surveillance equipment. Sarah's been busy, Janet reported. She's transferred nearly $2 million from subsidiary accounts over the past month. Small amounts, but they add up. Letter, I said. We'll need that as evidence. Rick, what did you find on the doctor? He's not really a psychiatrist, Rick said. Lost his license 5 years ago for falsifying medical records. He's done this before declaring elderly people incompetent, so their families could take control of assets. My phone rang. It was Thomas. Dad? His voice was strained. Can we talk alone? Come by the house, I said. An hour later, my eldest son sat across from me in my study. For the first time in days, he looked me in the eye. I don't know what to do, he began. Sarah says you're sick, that Mom was worried about your memory, but Daniel says... What does your heart say? I asked. Thomas broke down. I know you're not sick, but Sarah... She has these photos, Dad. She says if I don't cooperate, she'll destroy our family. What photos? His face crumbled. Mom told me years ago about who my real father was. Sarah found out somehow. She has DNA test results. She says if I don't help her, she'll expose everything, destroy the family name. The final piece clicked into place. Sarah hadn't just targeted our money. She'd researched our family secrets, found the weapon to control Thomas. Son, I said gently, your mother and I have always loved you. Biology doesn't change that. But the scandal... There's something you need to know, I said. Sarah killed your mother. The color drained from Thomas's face as I showed him the security footage, the journal entries, the evidence Rick had gathered. When I finished, he was sobbing. What have I done? Oh God, what have I done? You were manipulated by a professional, I said. But now you have a choice. Help me stop her, or let her destroy everything your mother and I built. Thomas looked up, and I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd always tried to do right. What do you need me to do? The game had changed. Sarah thought she held all the cards, but she'd just lost her biggest asset. Tomorrow, at the meeting she'd orchestrated, she'd learn what happened when you murdered my wife and threatened my family. Justice wouldn't just be served, it would be complete. The next morning arrived with unusual clarity for November in Georgia. I woke early, dressed carefully in my best suit, the charcoal one Margaret had bought me for our 40th anniversary. Today wasn't about appearing weak. Today was about honoring her memory. Janet arrived at 7 with additional files. Bruno, I found something else. Sarah opened a bank account in the Cayman Islands 2 weeks before Margaret died. There have been 3 wire transfers, all from different company subsidiaries. Add it to the evidence file, I said, straightening my tie. Is Charles ready? He'll be at the office by 1:30 with his team. Detective Morrison is also on standby. Morrison. No relation, despite the shared surname, but a good detective who'd helped the company with corporate theft cases before. Rick had been feeding him information all week. At noon, Thomas called. Dad, Sarah's suspicious. She kept asking me about our conversation last night. I told her you seemed confused and agreed to sign the papers. Good. Let her believe she's won. Are you ready for your part? I recorded her this morning. Thomas said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. She was on the phone with Marcus, laughing about how stupid we all were. She actually said, the old fool will sign everything over, and then we can move to the final phase. Final phase? Dad, I think she plans to have you committed after you sign. Maybe worse. She mentioned something about how you won't be a problem much longer. A chill ran down my spine, but not from fear. From resolve. Sarah had graduated from murdering wives to planning the disposal of husbands. I arrived at the office at 1:15. The parking lot was fuller than usual for a Saturday, and I noticed several cars I didn't recognize. Sarah had brought reinforcements. In the lobby, I found Daniel and Grace already waiting. Grace held a manila envelope close to her chest. What's that? I asked. Insurance, she said. I've been recording every interaction with Sarah for the past week. She doesn't know I studied journalism before switching to education. Old habits of documenting everything. That's my girl. I said, feeling genuine warmth for the first time in days. We rode the elevator to the executive floor. The conference room doors were closed, but I could hear voices inside. Multiple voices. "Sounds like Sarah brought an audience," Daniel observed. "Let her," I replied. "The more witnesses, the better." We entered to find the room transformed. Sarah had rearranged everything, placing herself at the head of the table, with a backdrop of company achievement plaques. The symbolism wasn't subtle. She wore a severe black suit, her hair pulled back every inch, the grieving but responsible daughter-in-law taking charge. Thomas sat to her right, his face a mask of misery. Marcus flanked her left, wearing an expensive suit that screamed new money. Dr. Stevenson perched nearby, briefcase. Open papers spread before him like weapons. But Sarah had indeed brought extras. Two men I didn't recognize sat along the wall, one in his 50s, with predatory eyes, the other younger, typing on a laptop. "Bruno." Sarah rose her voice, dripping false concern. "You look better today. Did you rest well?" "Well enough," I said, taking a seat in the middle of the table, not at either end. Let her think she controlled the room. "Before we begin," Sarah continued, "I've invited some additional advisors. This is Mr. Blackwood, a specialist in estate transitions, and Mr. Carey, who'll be documenting everything for legal purposes." "Documenting?" Grace asked sharply. "Standard procedure." Blackwood spoke with a smooth, practiced voice. "When significant assets are involved, it's best to have complete records." I noticed Daniel texting under the table and gave him a subtle nod. He was alerting Charles that we had unexpected guests. "Now then." Sarah produced a stack of documents. "We've prepared everything to make this transition as smooth as possible." "Bruno, I know this is difficult, but Thomas is ready to take on the company leadership. You've trained him well." She slid papers toward me. I picked them up, noting my hands remained perfectly steady. No trembling today. "These seem very comprehensive," I said, flipping through pages. "You've been thorough." "We've had help," Sarah admitted. "Mr. Blackwood specializes in these situations." "What situations would those be?" Grace asked. "When family patriarchs need to step down for health reasons," Blackwood replied. "I've handled dozens of these transitions. It's always emotional, but necessary." Dozens. I looked up. That must be lucrative. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. "I provide a necessary service." "I'm sure you do." I continued reading, buying time. "This mentions immediate transfer of all assets. That seems rather rushed." "It's for your protection," Dr. Stevenson interjected. "Given your recent episodes." "What episodes?" Daniel demanded. "You keep mentioning these supposed incidents, but you've never provided specifics." Stevenson shuffled his papers. "Well, there was the midnight gardening incident." "That was fabricated," Thomas said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. "I mean, I might have been mistaken about the details." Sarah's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Thomas, darling, you were very clear about what you saw." "Maybe we should take a break," I suggested. "This is all overwhelming. Could someone get me some water?" "I'll go," Thomas offered quickly, almost fleeing the room. Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing fury beneath. But she recovered quickly. "Of course, Bruno. We want you comfortable. While Thomas is gone, perhaps we could review the medical evaluation." Stevenson eagerly opened his briefcase. "I've documented several concerning behaviors." "Based on whose observations?" Grace interrupted. "Have you actually examined Bruno?" "Well, not formally, but family reports." "Sarah's reports," Daniel corrected. "Not family. Sarah." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Marcus shifted in his chair, his hand moving to his jacket pocket. I watched him carefully. Was he armed? "I think everyone needs to calm down," Blackwood said. "These proceedings can be emotional." "These aren't proceedings," I said quietly. "This is a family meeting. Nothing more." "Actually," Sarah stood, her voice hardening, Given your obvious confusion about the situation, it might be best if we proceeded without you. Thomas has power of attorney." "No, he doesn't," I said. "I have the documents right here." Sarah waved papers. "Forgeries," I replied calmly. "Just like the will you claim Margaret signed 2 weeks before her death." The room went silent. Sarah's face cycled through emotions: surprise, calculation, rage. "Bruno, you're clearly having another episode," she began. "The only episode here is of fraud," I said. "But please continue. I'm curious to see how far you're willing to go." Thomas returned with water, but also with company. Janet entered behind him, wheeling a cart with boxes of files. "What's this?" Sarah demanded. "Evidence," I said, standing. "You wanted a meeting about the family assets. Let's have one. But first, I think we should wait for my actual lawyer." "I thought Mr. Blackwood is your accomplice, not my lawyer," I finished. "Charles Worthington has represented me for 30 years. He should be here any moment." Sarah's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're obviously not competent to make decisions. Dr. Stevenson, tell them." The fake psychiatrist started to speak, but the conference room door opened again. Charles Worthington entered, flanked by 2 associates carrying briefcases and files. But it was the person behind them who made Sarah go pale. Detective Morrison of the Atlanta Police Department stood in the doorway, badge visible, hand resting casually on his service weapon. "Good afternoon, everyone," Morrison said. "I understand we're having a family meeting about inheritance. Mind if I sit in? I do so enjoy family gatherings." Sarah sank into her chair. Marcus's hand moved again toward his pocket, but Morrison's sharp look stopped him. "Now then," I said, retaking control of my conference room, "let's discuss what's really been happening here. Charles, would you begin with Margaret's actual will?" Charles opened his briefcase with theatrical precision. "I'd be happy to, Bruno. But first, I believe Detective Morrison has some interesting information about Mrs. Sarah Morrison's previous marriages." Sarah's mask didn't just slip this time. It shattered completely. The trap was closing, and she knew it. Charles Worthington commanded the room with the presence of a man who'd spent 40 years in courtrooms. He placed a leather portfolio on the table and withdrew a sealed envelope. "Before we discuss anything else," Charles began, "I need to establish the legal facts. This is Margaret Morrison's last will and testament executed 3 years ago with video documentation and multiple witnesses." "That's impossible," Sarah sputtered. "I have her will right here, dated last month." "Forged," Charles said simply. Rather clumsily, I might add. Margaret never used the phrase worldly possessions in her life. She was far too practical for such flowery language. I watched Sarah's face transform as Charles continued. "Furthermore, Bruno Morrison doesn't personally own Morrison Logistics. It's held in an irrevocable trust, established 25 years ago. Margaret was co-trustee. Even if Bruno wanted to sign it over, he legally cannot." "You're lying." Marcus stood abruptly, but Detective Morrison shifted slightly, and Marcus sat back down. "I have the trust documents here." Charles produced another folder. "Witnessed, notarized, and filed with the state. Any transfer would require approval from all trustees, including the bank's trust department." Sarah grabbed her forged will, scanning it frantically. "But Thomas has power of attorney." "No, he doesn't." Charles smiled thinly. "That document was never properly executed. Bruno's signature was forged rather poorly. We have handwriting experts who will testify to that fact." "Thomas?" Sarah turned on her husband. "Tell them." Thomas stood slowly, reaching into his jacket. Sarah's eyes lit with hope until he pulled out his phone. "I recorded our conversation this morning, Sarah," he said, his voice steady. "You explaining how you forged Dad's signature, how you've been stealing from the company, how you—" his voice cracked, "how you switched Mom's heart medication." The room erupted. Blackwood and Carey started for the door, but 2 uniformed officers entered, blocking their path. Dr. Stevenson shrank in his chair, trying to become invisible. "This is entrapment," Sarah screamed. "You can't use recordings without consent." "Georgia is a one-party consent state," Grace said sweetly. "I learned that in my journalism classes. Only one person in the conversation needs to consent to recording. Funny how useful education can be." Charles cleared his throat. "Shall we continue, Detective Morrison? I believe you have some interesting historical information." Morrison stepped forward, producing his own folder. Sarah Peterson, also known as Sarah Conway, Sarah Mills, and Sarah Harrison. Married 4 times, widowed 3 times. Each husband died within 2 years of marriage. Each left everything to their grieving widow. "Coincidence," Sarah managed. Perhaps Morrison agreed. "But then, we have this." He produced a photograph. Security footage from Morrison residence September 15th. "You switching medication bottles. We've tested the substituted pills. They were sugar pills, harmless, but useless for a woman with chronic heart disease." "That proves nothing," Marcus interjected. "Maybe she was replacing expired medication." "With sugar pills," Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Additionally, we have your phone records, Mr. Conway." Marcus went rigid. "My name is Richardson." "No, it's Conway. You're Robert Conway's nephew, not Sarah's brother. We have hotel records showing you 2 sharing rooms going back 8 years. The Brother Act was cover for your romantic and financial partnership." Charles opened another folder. "There's more. Bruno asked me to research the company's finances. Janet, would you present your findings?" Janet stood, her usual calm demeanor, replaced by cold fury. "Over the past 3 months, someone using Thomas's credentials accessed our financial systems after hours. They mapped every asset, every account, every subsidiary. Then, starting 6 weeks ago, small transfers began. Never enough to trigger automatic alerts, but steady. Total stolen, $2.3 million. The transfers went to accounts in the Cayman Islands," Charles added. "Accounts opened by Sarah Morrison, using falsified corporate documents." Sarah had gone pale, but she wasn't finished. "You old fool," she snarled at me. "You think you're so clever? Thomas is still my husband. He'll inherit something, and competency hearing is still scheduled. Dr. Stevenson's report is filed with the court." "About that," Morrison smiled. "Dr. Gerald Stevenson, or should I say Gary Stevens, lost his medical license in 2019 for falsifying patient records. He's been helping families steal inheritances by declaring elderly relatives incompetent. We arrested his partner this morning. He's already talking." Stevenson made a break for the door, but the officers caught him easily. "As for the competency hearing," Charles added, "we've already filed a motion to dismiss based on fraudulent medical testimony. The judge was quite interested in our evidence." Sarah's carefully constructed plan was crumbling, but the worst was yet to come. "Now," I spoke for the first time in minutes, "let's discuss the most serious matter. Margaret's murder." "You can't prove that was murder," Sarah said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Actually, we can," Morrison replied. "You see, Margaret Morrison was a very intelligent woman. When she began feeling ill, she had blood samples drawn and stored. We tested them. They show traces of digitalis, a heart medication that's dangerous when combined with her regular prescription. You weren't just withholding her medication, Sarah. You were poisoning her." The room fell silent except for Thomas's quiet sobbing. "Margaret suspected," I said, looking directly at Sarah. "She documented everything in her journal. She even wrote you a letter." Charles produced an envelope with Margaret's handwriting. "To be opened in the event of my death, under suspicious circumstances," he read. Inside, Margaret details her suspicions, her symptoms, and her fear of you, Sarah. She wanted Bruno to know the truth. But I had saved the most devastating revelation for last. "There's one more thing," I said. "The DNA test you've been holding over Thomas's head. We've known about that for 30 years. Sarah's last card, her final leverage, dissolved before her eyes. Margaret insisted on the test when Thomas was born." I continued. She'd had a brief affair with her sister's husband during a rough patch in our marriage. When she discovered she was pregnant, she didn't know who the father was. The test proved Thomas wasn't biologically mine. Thomas looked up, tears streaming. "You knew." "We knew," I said gently. "And we decided it didn't matter. You were our son from the moment you were born. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does." "But Sarah said the scandal would destroy us," Thomas whispered. "The only scandal here," I replied, "is murder fraud and theft. Sarah counted on our family's love for you to keep you in line. She didn't understand that real families don't abandon each other over DNA." Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Sarah Morrison, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Marcus Conway, you're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud." As the officers moved in with handcuffs, Sarah made one last desperate play. "Thomas, tell them I was protecting you. Tell them it was your idea." Thomas stood tall, looking more like the son I'd raised than he had in months. "No more lies, Sarah. You killed my mother. You tried to destroy my family. The only thing you ever protected was your own greed." As they led Sarah away, she turned back, her mask completely gone, revealing the predator beneath. "You'll pay for this, old man. I'll get out, and when I do—" "No," I said calmly, "you won't. You see, we've been in contact with the families of your previous husbands. They're reopening those cases. You'll be facing charges in 3 states. Even if by some miracle you escape conviction here, Florida and Texas are waiting." Her scream of rage echoed down the hallway as they dragged her out. Marcus followed, but not before trying one last threat. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Actually, we do," Morrison interrupted. "Your gambling debts to the Torino family? They're very interested in your arrest. Seems you've been promising them money you don't have. I doubt you'll be safe even in prison." As the room emptied of criminals and their accomplices, my family gathered around me. Thomas collapsed in a chair, head in his hands. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I betrayed you, betrayed Mom's memory." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You were manipulated by a professional con artist. What matters is that when the moment came, you chose your family." Daniel and Grace joined us, and for the first time since Margaret's death, I felt the warmth of my real family. Charles began packing up his files. "Bruno will need to deal with the financial aftermath. The stolen money." "Can wait," I said. "Today we exposed a murderer and saved our family. The money is just numbers on paper." Detective Morrison lingered by the door. "Mr. Morrison, your wife would be proud. She protected you even from beyond the grave." As the afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows, I thought of Margaret. Her roses would bloom again in spring, and our family would heal. Sarah had tried to destroy us with our own secrets, but she'd failed to understand the most important truth. Real love, real family survives everything. Even death, even betrayal, even the darkest secrets. The trap had been sprung, the predators caught, and justice for Margaret had begun. 3 days after Sarah's arrest, I stood in the district attorney's office watching a broken woman on the monitor. Sarah sat in an interrogation room, her designer clothes replaced by orange jail garb, her perfect hair now limp and unwashed. The arrogance had drained from her face, replaced by the hollow look of someone whose entire world had collapsed. "She's been talking for hours," District Attorney Patricia Williams informed me. "Once we showed her the evidence from Florida and Texas, she realized cooperation was her only chance to avoid death row." On the screen, Sarah spoke in a monotone voice to the detective. "Robert Conway was the first. I met Marcus at his funeral. He was handling the estate. We realized we made a good team." "How many?" the detective asked. 4 husbands," Sarah admitted. "Robert William David and Margaret Morrison." My chest tightened, hearing my wife's name grouped with Sarah's victims, but I forced myself to watch. "Tell us about Margaret," the detective pressed. Sarah's facade cracked slightly. "She was supposed to be easy. Old woman with a heart condition. I researched everything learned about the family dynamics, the DNA secret with Thomas. It was perfect leverage. But Margaret suspected you. The woman was sharper than I gave her credit for, Sarah admitted. She started documenting things, asking questions. I had to accelerate the timeline. Patricia paused the video. She's given us everything, Bruno. The poison supplier, the forged documents, even the network of corrupt lawyers and doctors they used. We're looking at a conspiracy involving at least 12 people across 4 states. What about Thomas? I asked. He was manipulated. The DA in Florida has already agreed to immunity in exchange for his testimony, Patricia assured me. Your son was a victim, not a perpetrator. That evening, I called a family meeting at the house. Thomas arrived first, looking haggard, but determined. Daniel and Grace came next, with little Emma running straight to her uncle for a hug. The simple gesture broke through Thomas's composure, and he held his niece tightly, tears streaming. I need to tell you all something, Thomas began when we'd gathered in the living room. I've filed for divorce. I've also requested a full audit of my personal finances. Whatever Sarah stole using my access, I want to make right. That's not necessary, I started, but Thomas shook his head. Yes, it is. I let her into our lives. I chose her over my family. I need to make amends. Grace spoke up. Thomas, you were targeted by a professional predator. She studied our family, found vulnerabilities, and exploited them. That's what predators do. But I should have seen... How? Daniel asked. She fooled all of us initially. Dad only caught on because Mom left him clues. We talked late into the night, rebuilding the bonds Sarah had tried to sever. Thomas revealed more about the manipulation, how Sarah had isolated him from family gatherings, planted seeds of resentment about Daniel being the favored son, and constantly reminded him that he wasn't Bruno's real child. She played on every insecurity I've ever had, Thomas admitted. Made me believe you only kept me around out of obligation. Son, I said firmly, the day you were born I held you in that hospital room and made a promise. You were my boy from that moment. DNA doesn't make a father. Choices do. And I chose you, just as you chose us when it mattered most. The next weeks brought a cascade of revelations. Rick's investigation uncovered the full extent of Sarah and Marcus's operation. They had a list of targets across the Southeast, elderly widowers, with substantial assets and family vulnerabilities. Margaret hadn't been their first victim in Georgia, just their most ambitious target. The trial preparations began immediately. I testified before the grand jury, presenting Margaret's journal, the security footage, and the financial records. Other families came forward with their own suspicions and evidence. William Harrison's daughter had always suspected Sarah, but couldn't prove anything. David Mills's brother had hired investigators, but hit dead ends. Marcus Conway flipped on Sarah to save himself, revealing details that shocked even the seasoned prosecutors. They had practiced their con, like actors preparing for roles, with Sarah studying videos of grieving widows to perfect her performance. They had profiles on dozens of potential victims, complete with family trees, financial assessments, and identified weaknesses. Margaret Morrison was supposed to be their biggest score, Patricia told me after one particularly revealing session. $30 million in company assets, plus personal wealth. They planned to liquidate everything within a year of taking control. But Margaret had been smarter than they anticipated. Her journal revealed she'd started suspecting Sarah within months of Thomas's marriage. She'd documented conversations, noted inconsistencies, and even hired her own investigator. Why didn't she tell me? I asked Patricia. According to her journal, she was protecting Thomas. She hoped she was wrong, that her suspicions were just a mother's overprotectiveness. By the time she was certain, she was already sick. The media caught wind of the story, dubbing it the Black Widow of the South case. Reporters camped outside the house until I hired security. Thomas bore the brunt of public scrutiny with social media, painting him as either a villain or victim depending on the narrative. I deserve it, he said one evening, staring at his laptop. No, Grace said firmly, closing the computer. You deserve healing. You deserve to move forward. What you don't deserve is to torture yourself with the opinions of strangers who don't know the full story. Sarah's family emerged from the woodwork painting her as a victim of circumstances. Her mother gave tearful interviews claiming mental illness, childhood trauma, anything to garner sympathy. But the evidence was overwhelming. When forensic accountants finished their analysis, they'd tracked over $15 million stolen across all her marriages. Then came an unexpected call from Charles. Bruno, you need to come to my office. There's been a development. I found him with a young woman, mid-30s, with Sarah's bone structure, but kinder eyes. This is Jennifer Harrison, Charles introduced. William Harrison's daughter from his first marriage. Mr. Morrison. Jennifer began, I'm sorry for your loss. I know what it's like to lose a parent to that woman. Thank you, I said, studying her. But why are you here? Jennifer reached into her bag, producing a flash drive. After my father died, I found this hidden in his workshop. I've been afraid to come forward, but when I heard about your wife... The flash drive contained recordings. William Harrison had suspected Sarah and recorded their conversations. In one, Sarah discussed her plans with someone who sounded like Marcus. The old fool trusts me completely, Sarah's voice said. A few more weeks, and he'll have a tragic accident on his boat, just like we discussed. This is evidence of premeditation, Charles said. This proves the pattern goes back over a decade. Jennifer had more. I've been in contact with other families. David Mills recorded conversations too. Robert Conway's son found emails. We've all been gathering evidence, waiting for someone brave enough to take her on. You gave us that courage, Mr. Morrison. The coalition of families Sarah had destroyed became a powerful force. We shared evidence, supported each other through depositions, and presented a united front. The prosecution's case transformed from a single murder to a pattern of predation spanning 12 years. Thomas threw himself into helping the investigation, providing insights into Sarah's methods that only an insider could know. She kept files, he revealed. Psychological profiles on everyone in the family. She knew Daniel was protective, so she made sure to trigger conflicts between us. She knew Grace was observant, so she played the devoted wife whenever Grace was around. What about me? I asked. Thomas hesitated. She thought you were a typical old-school businessman, proud, stubborn, set in your ways. She believed grief would make you vulnerable, easy to manipulate. She never imagined you'd investigate. She said... He paused. Tell me. She said old men always wanted to believe young women cared about them. That ego would blind you to the truth. I laughed bitterly. She confused ego with love. I never needed Sarah's approval. I had Margaret's love for 42 years. That was enough. As winter turned to spring, the case built toward trial. Sarah's lawyers tried every trick, mental incompetence, claims of coercion by Marcus, even allegations that I had framed her out of jealousy. Nothing stuck. The evidence was too comprehensive, the pattern too clear. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. Patricia called with news of a plea deal. She's agreed to life without parole in exchange for full cooperation. She'll testify against Marcus and the entire network. She'll also reveal where the money is hidden. No death penalty. She's facing charges in 3 states. Even with a plea, she'll die in prison. This guarantees it while saving the family's years of trials. That evening, I visited Margaret's grave. Spring had arrived and her roses were budding, preparing for their first bloom without her tending. We got her, my love, I whispered to the headstone. Your last investigation was successful. Our family is safe. As I placed fresh flowers by her stone, I felt a presence beside me. Thomas had arrived carrying his own bouquet. Mom would be proud, he said quietly. You solved her final case. We solved it, I corrected. Family protects family. She knew we would. Standing there in the spring sunset, surrounded by the promise of new blooms, I understood Margaret's final gift. She hadn't just protected us from Sarah. She'd reminded us what we were fighting for: not money, or companies, or reputations, but each other. Sarah had thought our secrets would destroy us. Instead, the truth had set us free. 6 months after Sarah's arrest, I stood in the newly renovated conference room of Morrison Logistics, the same room where she'd tried to steal everything my wife and I had built. But today, the mahogany table hosted a different gathering: the inaugural meeting of the Margaret Morrison Foundation for Cardiac Research and Family Protection Services. Around the table sat representatives from all the families Sarah had devastated. Jennifer Harrison had flown in from Florida. David Mills's brother Robert came from Texas. Even Robert Conway's elderly sister had made the journey from Arizona. Thomas sat to my right as the foundation's vice president, while Daniel handled the legal framework as our chief counsel. The foundation will serve two purposes, I explained to the assembled group. First, we'll fund research into cardiac conditions like the ones Sarah exploited to murder Margaret. Second, we'll provide resources for families who suspect elder abuse or inheritance fraud. No one should go through what we experienced alone. Jennifer Harrison raised her hand. My father would have loved this. He always said tragedy should teach, not just take. The foundation was Margaret's idea, actually found in the final pages of her journal. If something happens to me, use our resources to protect others. Let my death mean something. Grace had designed our logo, a rose, blooming from a shield symbolizing beauty, protected by vigilance. Emma, now 6, had insisted on adding a heart to the center. For Grandma Margaret's love, she'd explained, and no one could argue with that logic. After the meeting, Thomas and I walked through the company warehouse. Workers nodded respectfully, but I caught something else in their expressions: admiration. The story had spread throughout the company, how the old man had outwitted a professional con artist, how the family had united against a common threat. I've been thinking about Mom's journal, Thomas said as we inspected a shipment. She knew for months, but kept investigating. She could have confronted Sarah immediately. But that would have put you in the middle, I replied. Forced you to choose sides without understanding the full truth. Margaret was protecting you while gathering evidence. She knew patience would reveal everything. Like you did, Thomas observed. You could have had Sarah arrested the moment you found the security footage, but you waited. Built the case. Protected the family. We paused by the loading dock, watching trucks depart for destinations across the Southeast. The company Sarah had tried to steal now employed over 300 people supporting their families, contributing to the community. Your mother taught me that strength isn't always about immediate action, I said. Sometimes it's about appearing weak while you prepare. About gathering your resources, understanding your enemy, and striking when victory is assured. The silent wolf strategy. Thomas smiled. That's what Rick called it. An old soldier's wisdom, I agreed. But more than that, it's about trust. I trusted that truth would prevail, that our family bonds were stronger than Sarah's manipulations, that justice, though slow, would be complete. That evening, the family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd reinstated after Sarah's arrest. The dining room buzzed with conversation and laughter sounds that had been absent during the dark months of her influence. Thomas had started dating again, cautiously, with a teacher named Linda, who understood his past, but didn't define him by it. Daniel's architectural firm had designed a children's wing for the local hospital, named for Margaret. Life was moving forward. After dinner, as we sat on the porch, watching Emma play in the garden, Grace asked the question others had danced around. Bruno, how did you stay so calm when Sarah was poisoning Margaret, stealing from the company, manipulating Thomas? How did you not just explode? I considered the question, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Anger would have clouded my judgment. Rage would have made me reckless. Sarah counted on emotional reactions, used them as weapons. The only way to defeat a predator is to become a better hunter. But the pain, Grace pressed. Losing Margaret, seeing Thomas under Sarah's spell. The pain was fuel, I admitted. Every insult to Margaret's memory, every manipulation of Thomas, every stolen dollar added to my resolve. But I channeled it into purpose, not revenge. There's a difference. Daniel leaned forward. What difference? Revenge is emotional, often incomplete, sometimes self-destructive. I explained. Justice is precise, thorough, and serves a greater good. I didn't just want Sarah punished. I wanted her entire network exposed, other families protected, and our family healed. That required patience, planning, and yes, pain. Thomas spoke quietly. I carry guilt every day. I brought her into our lives. I chose her over family wisdom. And that guilt will fade, I assured him. Replaced by wisdom. You'll recognize manipulation, faster value trust, more deeply protect those you love more fiercely. Sarah gave you an expensive education in human nature. Use it. As darkness settled over the garden, I shared something I'd been contemplating. I've been writing a book, a guide for families on recognizing and preventing elder financial abuse. Patricia Williams is helping along with Detective Morrison. We want Sarah's playbook to become a protection manual. Mom would love that, Daniel said, taking something evil and transforming it into something good. She already did, I replied. Her journal, her preparations, her final messages, they all transformed a potential tragedy into triumph. She turned her murder into our salvation. We sat in comfortable silence, each processing the journey we'd taken. From that horrible moment in the boardroom, when Sarah revealed her true nature through the investigation, the arrests, the trials, to this peaceful evening surrounded by family, we'd traveled a hard road. You know what the real lesson is? Thomas asked suddenly. Love is stronger than greed. Family bonds are tougher than criminal conspiracies. Truth, even painful truth, beats comfortable lies. And patience, Grace added. Good things come to those who wait and prepare. Don't forget forgiveness. Daniel contributed, glancing at his brother. Family means second chances when they're earned. Emma ran up to the porch, clutching a handful of roses from Margaret's garden. Look, Grandma's flowers are blooming everywhere. She was right. Despite the harsh winter, despite losing their tender, Margaret's roses had returned in abundance. The garden blazed with color, reds, pinks, yellows, and whites, each bush stronger than before. That's the final lesson, I said, accepting a rose from Emma. Life persists, love endures. What's rooted in good soil and tended with care will bloom again, no matter how harsh the winter. Later, as the family prepared to leave, Thomas lingered. Dad, do you think Mom knew how this would end? Her journal, the evidence she gathered, it's like she scripted our victory from beyond. I smiled, remembering my brilliant, caring wife. Margaret always said the best defense was documentation. She probably hoped she was wrong about Sarah, but she prepared in case she was right. That's love, son, protecting your family even when you can't be there. Like you did, Thomas said, pretending to be weak while building an ironclad case. I learned from the best, I admitted. Your mother was the real detective in the family. I just followed her roadmap. As Thomas's car disappeared down the driveway, I returned to Margaret's garden. The moon had risen, casting silver light over the blooms. I could almost hear her voice in the evening breeze, see her smile in the nodding roses. Thank you, my love, I whispered, for the years we had, for the family we built, for the wisdom to protect them, even in death. Rest now. We're safe. A year later, at the Foundation's first anniversary gala, I looked out at a ballroom filled with hundreds of people. Families who'd found justice through our resources. Researchers advancing cardiac treatments. Lawyers volunteering to help elder abuse victims. Sarah's dark legacy had been transformed into a beacon of hope. Thomas gave the keynote speech, sharing our story with raw honesty. A predator entered our family, exploited our vulnerabilities, and murdered my mother. But she underestimated three things: my mother's intelligence, my father's patience, and our family's love. Those who prey on the elderly, beware. We're watching. We're documenting. We're waiting. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was thinking of Margaret of her roses, of the way love planted deep grows stronger through adversity. That night, I visited her grave one more time, placing a bouquet of her favorite roses by the headstone. We did it, sweetheart. Your death saved countless others. Your love protected our family. Your wisdom defeated evil. Not bad for an old couple from Georgia. As I walked back to my car, I felt peace settle over me like a warm blanket. Sarah was serving life in prison. Her network dismantled her victims, finding closure. Thomas had healed stronger and wiser. The family was united, the company thriving, the foundation growing. But most importantly, Margaret's love lived on, not just in memory, but in action. Every family we protected, every elder we saved from abuse, every rose that bloomed in her garden was a testament to a simple truth. Love, real love, is immortal. It protects, persists, and ultimately prevails. Evil may be cunning, but good is patient. Predators may be clever, but families are resilient. And sometimes the greatest victory comes not from strength or wealth or power, but from an old man's patience and a wise woman's final gift. If you've made it this far in my story, perhaps you're wondering what you would do in such a situation. Would you recognize the warning signs? Would you have the patience to wait and build your case? Would you trust in family bonds when tested by betrayal? I encourage you to share this story with your loved ones, especially those who might be vulnerable to such predators. Like this video, if it touched your heart or opened your eyes. Subscribe to hear more stories of justice and family triumph. And please comment below with your own experiences or thoughts, because every story shared might save another family from suffering what mine endured. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of lost patience and ultimate justice. May you never need these lessons. But if you do remember, document everything, trust your instincts, and never underestimate the power of family love. Until we meet again, hold your loved ones close, tend your gardens well, and remember, the best inheritance you can leave or receive isn't money or property, but wisdom, love, and the courage to protect what matters most.